Friends, thank you for being here today. What if I told you that the next great geopolitical conflict of our time won't be fought in the deserts of the Middle East or the contested borders of Eastern Europe, but rather in the freezing, silent, and unforgiving expanse of the Arctic? Are we truly prepared for a world where the ice melts, revealing a geopolitical treasure trove that every superpower on Earth is desperate to claim? To understand the magnitude of what is unfolding at the top of the world, we must first travel to the icy fjords and snow-swept landscapes of Norway. The setting was a massive, unprecedented NATO military exercise known as Cold Response. Imagine the scene. Over 30,000 highly trained troops representing 14 different nations, enduring sub-zero temperatures and unforgiving terrain, all gathered with a single unified purpose: defending the high north. But the true significance of this gathering was not found in the roar of fighter jets or the maneuvering of warships. It was found at a press conference, a moment that fundamentally shifted the tectonic plates of global defense strategies. Standing shoulder to shoulder with the leaders of Germany and Norway, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney delivered a message that sent shockwaves through the international intelligence community. His words were not just meant for the journalists in the room, they were a direct signal broadcast to Moscow, to Beijing, and perhaps most pointedly, to Washington, D.C. This was not your standard, polite, diplomatic briefing. It was a pivotal moment in global geopolitics. Canada was stepping out of its traditional, quieter role and forcefully stepping forward as a primary security power in the Arctic. In doing so, Carney articulated a groundbreaking vision. The future of northern defense, and perhaps the future of global stability, will no longer rely solely on the United States of America. Instead, it will depend on an ironclad, united coalition of democratic middle powers. But why the Arctic? And why now? To fully grasp the gravity of this geopolitical shift, we must abandon our outdated perceptions of the far north. For generations, we have viewed the region as a static, frozen, and largely neglected frontier, a realm of polar bears, scientific research stations, and endless ice. That reality is dead. Today, the Arctic is rapidly transforming into one of the most strategically critical and fiercely contested regions on planet Earth. Beneath the receding ice sheets lies a staggering bounty of wealth. We are talking about vast, untouched reserves of critical minerals, the rare earth elements that are the absolute lifeblood of the 21st century economy, essential for everything from electric vehicle batteries and smartphones to advanced military targeting systems. Alongside these minerals sit massive, untapped reservoirs of oil and natural gas. Furthermore, as the ice continues to melt, legendary, previously unnavigable maritime routes like the Northwest Passage are opening up. These routes promise to drastically cut transit times between Asia and Europe, potentially reshaping global trade and rendering traditional choke points like the Suez and Panama Canals less dominant. Whoever controls these waters controls the future of international commerce. This realization has triggered a frantic, high-stakes wave of global competition, and the major powers are not just watching, they are acting with alarming speed. Look at Russia. The Kremlin has not been subtle about its intentions. Over the past decade, Russia has been aggressively expanding its military footprint across its vast Arctic coastline. They have reopened and modernized Soviet-era military bases that had been abandoned for decades. They are deploying advanced anti-aircraft missile systems, building new deep-water ports, and launching a fleet of nuclear-powered icebreakers that no other nation on Earth can currently match. For Russia, the Arctic is not just an economic opportunity. It is a critical strategic bastion, and they are fortifying it heavily. Then there is China. Despite being thousands of miles away from the Arctic Circle, Beijing has brazenly declared itself a near-Arctic state. This is a diplomatic invention designed to justify their massive intrusion into the region. China is pouring billions of dollars into its Polar Silk Road initiative, investing heavily in northern shipping routes, funding resource extraction projects in vulnerable northern communities, and building their own fleet of icebreakers. Their strategy is a masterclass in economic statecraft, using financial leverage to secure a permanent foothold in a region where they have no geographic claim. And then we must confront the Trump factor. The shifting dynamics of the Arctic have been deeply complicated by the unpredictable nature of recent U.S. leadership, particularly under Donald Trump. During his presidency, Trump floated an idea that initially sounded like a bizarre punchline: the United States purchasing the sovereign territory of Greenland. While many dismissed it as a fleeting media distraction, for the nations that actually live in the Arctic, it was a profound and terrifying shock to the system. Trump's open desire to acquire Greenland to capture its massive mineral wealth was a glaring warning sign. It proved that in the modern era of transactional geopolitics, even long-standing, seemingly unshakable alliances could be tested by raw, unbridled resource competition. It sent a chill through the capitals of allied nations, suggesting a future where traditional partnerships might be cast aside in favor of aggressive 19th-century-style territorial acquisitions. Call to action. Before we dive into how Canada and its European allies are fighting back against this new reality, I want to hear from you. Do you think the United States is losing its strategic grip on the Arctic, or is this just a temporary shift in global politics? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I read every single one of them, so how do we respond to this? Faced with this terrifying new reality, a militarizing Russia, an encroaching China, and an increasingly unreliable United States, Canada is refusing to be a passive victim of circumstance. Instead of reacting defensively to these escalating global threats, Ottawa is making a bold, calculated first move to ensure absolute control over its own sovereign territory. Mark Carney's strategy is not built on hopeful rhetoric. It is built on a massive, historic financial commitment. Canada has announced an unprecedented injection of over $40 billion dedicated specifically to Arctic defense, military infrastructure, and economic security. This is not merely an upgrade, it is a fundamental transformation of how Canada views its northern borders. Historically, Canada's presence in the Arctic has been somewhat seasonal and largely symbolic. That era is over. The new strategy guarantees a continuous, robust military presence by land, sea, and air 365 days a year. To understand the scale of this undertaking, you have to look at the map. The Canadian Arctic accounts for a staggering 40% of the nation's entire landmass and a massive 75% of its coastline. It is a territory that shares a 3,000-kilometer maritime border with the European Union. Defending this vast, hostile environment requires specialized equipment, deep-water naval facilities, advanced satellite communication networks, and highly trained personnel capable of operating in the most extreme conditions on Earth. But this $40 billion investment is about more than just buying new ships and radars. It is about asserting undeniable sovereignty. It is a loud, unmistakable declaration that Canada will not tolerate foreign incursions. When Chinese research vessels, which often serve dual military purposes, probe Canadian waters, or when Russian bombers test Canadian airspace, they will now be met with a formidable, permanent defensive wall. Furthermore, this strategy is designed to protect Canada from being Greenlanded. That term has now entered the geopolitical lexicon to describe the fear of opportunistic allies using economic or political coercion to strip away northern resources. By heavily investing in the economic security of its northern communities and building its own infrastructure, Canada is ensuring that it, and it alone, controls the destiny of its critical minerals and maritime routes. While some leaders in Washington might look at the Arctic and see real estate to be acquired, Carney is ensuring that Canada's north remains fiercely, unapologetically Canadian. Call to action. If you are finding this deep dive into global security valuable so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. We analyze the massive geopolitical shifts that the mainstream media often misses, and having you on board helps us keep bringing you these critical stories. This bold commitment to defending our own backyard naturally brings us to the most uncomfortable yet necessary question raised during that fateful press conference in Norway. A reporter touched on the very issue that had been quietly keeping NATO allies awake at night. Can the United States still be fully, unconditionally trusted when it comes to Arctic security? The answer to that question is complex, and it requires a delicate diplomatic balancing act. Mark Carney did not stand at the podium and reject the alliance with the United States. To do so would be strategic suicide. He rightfully acknowledged the deep, ongoing, and vital integration between the Canadian and American militaries. For decades, the two nations have stood shoulder to shoulder defending the North American continent through systems like NORAD. This integrated listening post and air defense system is a marvel of military cooperation and a foundational pillar of continental security. However, acknowledging past successes is not the same as banking on future reliability. While the military-to-military trust remains intact, the political rhetoric emanating from parts of the U.S. establishment has fundamentally altered the calculus. The era of Donald Trump attacking NATO allies, questioning the financial value of defense partnerships, and flirting with territorial expansion has left a lasting scar. It has introduced a level of existential uncertainty that no responsible government can ignore. Therefore, the pivot we are witnessing is not a rejection of the U.S., but a move from absolute dependence toward strategic autonomy. Canada is boldly declaring that it will no longer assume that someone else, namely the American military, will rush to defend its northern borders if a crisis erupts. Canada will do it itself. But Canada knows it cannot secure the entire Arctic alone, and this is where the true genius of the new strategy lies. Instead of relying on a single superpower, Canada is actively building and deepening a democratic network of middle powers. By integrating its defense strategies with like-minded allies who share basic, unshakable democratic values, nations like Norway, Germany, and the broader Nordic-Baltic NATO coalition, Canada is creating a new center of gravity in global security. What exactly is a middle power, and why are they so crucial right now? Middle powers are nations that possess significant economic and military capability, but lack the overwhelming dominance of a superpower like the US or China. Countries like Canada, Germany, and Norway are deeply invested in the rules-based international order. Their prosperity and security depend on international law, freedom of navigation, and diplomatic cooperation, not on coercion or territorial conquest. When these middle powers unite, they form a formidable bloc. They are not acting as rivals to the United States. Rather, they are evolving into highly capable partners that can act independently when necessary. If political chaos in Washington causes the U.S. to momentarily step back from the world stage, this middle power coalition is designed to step up, fill the void, and hold the line against authoritarian aggression in the high north. But let's be perfectly clear about what this new coalition actually looks like on the ground, because operating in the high north is a logistical and operational nightmare. The Arctic is not merely a location, it is an active adversary. It's an environment that actively wants to destroy your equipment. At 40 below zero, standard military-grade steel shatters like glass. Drone batteries drain in a matter of minutes. Traditional GPS signals heavily degrade near the poles, and the constantly shifting ice creates an unpredictable, highly lethal terrain. No single nation, not even a traditional superpower, has a monopoly on the specialized technology and sheer endurance required to master this extreme domain. This is exactly where the middle power coalition transitions from a grand diplomatic theory into a formidable operational reality. When Canada, Norway, Germany, and the Nordic-Baltic states pool their resources, they are combining highly specialized world-class capabilities that perfectly complement one another. Norway brings decades of unmatched, hard-won experience tracking subsurface threats in the freezing, turbulent waters of the Barents Sea. Germany contributes unparalleled naval engineering and advanced sensor technologies. Canada provides the massive geographic anchor, the deep-water northern ports, and a rapidly expanding fleet of specialized Arctic offshore patrol vessels. Together, they are creating a synchronized, unbreakable defense grid. We are no longer just talking about shared values. We are talking about joint procurement of heavily armored, ice-capable frigates. We are talking about unified satellite constellations designed specifically to punch through polar atmospheric interference, and deeply integrated intelligence-sharing networks that track the acoustic signature of every single commercial and military vessel entering the polar circle. And let me stress the absolute urgency of this endeavor. The timeline for this geopolitical scramble has been drastically accelerated. We are not preparing for a hypothetical conflict in the year 2040 or 2050. The crisis is unfolding right now, in real time, right in front of our eyes. Every single summer, as the sea ice extent hits new historic lows, we witness a blatant surge of uninvited, dual-purpose research vessels mapping the seabed, probing our coastal defenses, and actively testing our political resolve. The global commercial shipping giants are already drafting the complex logistics for year-round polar transit. The window to establish a firm, undeniable rule of law in the Arctic is closing rapidly. If these democratic middle powers do not cement their collective authority today, a massive power vacuum will be created, and authoritarian regimes are standing by, engines running, eager to fill that void with their own self-serving rules. This coalition is drawing a hard line in the snow. They are signaling that the Arctic will not become a lawless frontier akin to the Wild West, nor will it be quietly surrendered to the highest bidder. By interlocking their militaries, their economies, and their technological prowess, these nations are building a fortress of deterrence. As we look ahead, it becomes clear that we are doing more than just protecting frozen waters. We are actively shaping the very future of global security. What happened in Norway was not just another routine military photo opportunity. It was a loud, clear signal that the architecture of global defense is undergoing a profound evolution. We are witnessing a subtle but incredibly powerful shift away from a world order entirely dependent on the whims and political stability of a single superpower. In its place, a resilient, interconnected network of democracies is rising, capable of taking responsibility for their own defense and acting decisively to protect their sovereign interests. By stepping into this much larger role, Canada is not just securing its own borders. It is helping to secure the rules-based order for the 21st century. As the ice melts and the Arctic becomes the next great arena of global competition, the cooperation, shared values, and united strength of these democratic middle powers will define the balance of power. They are sending a message to the world. The North is awake, the North is united, and the North will be defended. Final call to action. So, what are your thoughts on this new middle power coalition? Can nations like Canada, Norway, and Germany really hold the line against authoritarian regimes without relying entirely on the United States? I want to read your perspectives, so drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you learned something new today, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel out. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dive geopolitical analysis. Until next time, stay informed.